And we are rolling on November. That sun, that blind's got to come down. It's killing my. It's giving me bad light. Can you? Someone help him pull it down as he lets it down. Go over there to the left side and pull it down. As you clear the, you gotta. Oh my God. Yeah, you pull it down. You pull it down and it clears the. Oh my God. You pull it clear. Make it clear so it'll go down. And you both. Two people have to pull on the bottom as you clear the rope. Yeah. Good. Okay. Good. See, it'll come down. Just clear the rope. Keep going. Keep pulling. Keep pulling. Keep pulling, 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 keep pulling. Doing fine, doing fine. You gotta pull too. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Now we're whistling, Dixie. Thank you, sir. Okay. All right. Okay. And I'm gonna be rude. It's gonna be 5 minutes and stop. So. Yeah. It's going to be 5 minutes and stop. We're getting through everyone. Go.
How do you have a dialogue with a regime built on an extremist ideology which says they want to control the land of the Muslims and spread their Twelver Jafri sect in the Muslim world? We will not wait for the war to be in Saudi Arabia. We will take it to them in Iran. These are the words of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This particular statement reflects the anti-Iran stance that he is taking, which further reflects the struggle for regional hegemony that is currently taking place in the Middle East between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The question I want to answer today is if Iran has used the Syrian civil war to gain a dominant position in the Middle East. The answer to this question is yes. And I will be giving you 3 reasons today as to why. The first reason is that the guiding policy of Iran is Shia empowerment, and Syria fits right into that. The second reason is the geopolitical importance of Syria in the region, and the third reason is that Iran is re-engineering the very demographic makeup of Syria to help strengthen the incumbent regime and, by extension, its own influence. And watch out for the third point because it gets really interesting at that point. Why is Syria important? In 2011, people rose up against incumbent dictator Bashar al-Assad to overthrow his rule. While they did not overthrow him in 2011, his control over the people did start to weaken when Iran stepped in to help strengthen control. Ever since then, Iran has been a key player in the region, and Syria has become a pawn for a much larger war for hegemony and struggle for hegemony in the Middle East. Now, my first reason. The guiding policy of Iran is Shia empowerment, and Syria fits right into that. Syria has a 70% Sunni population, whilst it has only a 12% Alawite population, according to the Syrian civil war map, which lays out the official statistics in the region. However, the ruling body under President Bashar al-Assad is Alawite. When people arose in 2011 to overthrow Bashar al-Assad, their demands were not religious in nature. However, he opened fire on the people, slaughtering hundreds of thousands. He created the situation to unfold in a way that made the conflict sectarian. Before 2011, there was always a divide between Shias and Sunnis in Syria. However, they went to the same markets, interacted in the same subways, did not group in a way, whatever they might have said in the privacy of their own homes, they still coexisted. However, since 2011 and the way that the Syrian civil war unfolded, this conflict became sectarian, and that's when Iran stepped in. Iran has used this conflict to completely push out Saudi Arabia and dictate what happens in Syria and demonstrating its own power. The second reason why Syria has been important for Iran in gaining dominance in the region is the geopolitical importance. President Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel recently said this, that Iran is using Syria as a base for military entrenchment. Whilst there's not a lot in common between the Jafari sect of Shias in Iran and the Alawites in Syria, they create this alliance on the basis of a mutual defensive threat that they face from the pro-Western hostile enemies that surround them. Syria acts as the perfect country to ally with, which enables Iran to make a crescent around Saudi Arabia and protect its geopolitical interests in the region. The third reason how Iran has used the Syrian civil war is that it has re-engineered the demographic makeup. When Bashar al-Assad massacred hundreds of thousands of people all the way from Homs to Damascus in Syria, those villages that he flattened were repopulated with Lebanese, Iraqi, and Syrian Shias. What used to be Sunni centers for power are now being repopulated with Shias, according to The Guardian. This has been the largest population shift in Syrian history. Once Bashar al-Assad in Iran dislocates the traditionally Sunni strongholds and gets Shias into those areas, they're able to assert their own influence. In summary, I have shown you 3 reasons today how Iran has used Syria to gain influence, to gain a dominant influence in the region. 4:45.
Oh, she has 15 seconds left.
Just as Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's statement reflects the growing intensity of the struggle for regional hegemony between Iran and Saudi Arabia, the Syrian civil war has been used by Iran to gain a dominant position in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. So very quickly, the next person should be getting up there while I talk to Insia. Your preview was much too long. Make it shorter. That will help you pick up the time. Your history lesson was excellent, but it needs to be linked a little better to your thesis. So link it back up to your thesis, but to gain a dominant position, link it back up each time to the end of it to say that's how they're gaining the dominant position, and that's how they're gaining the dominant position. I also just think Russia is a big player, and I didn't hear much of a mention of Russia so much. And so maybe I'm wrong, and maybe they are not such a big player, but I seem to think they deserve a little bit, at least a mention in your analysis. Not too many hand gestures, even when I forget to get nervous and engage the audience. How to go?
I think as far as the hand gestures were concerned, it was better. As far as engaging the audience was concerned, this is a topic that I feel very passionately about, and so I was trying to keep myself calm, so I'm more focused on the matter rather than the emotionality of it.
Yeah.
And then I felt really pressed for time, so I went through a lot of really jargony kind of stuff, which I felt lost the attention of an audience a bit.
Yeah.
But I was trying to get people involved. Let's not spend too much time on
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, Leonard, go. And call the timeout orally for me, please.
Okay.
4, like this. 3, 2, 1, time. Okay?
Yeah, do you want me to count down or up?
Down. 4 left, 3 left, 2 left, 1 left. Go, hands out of your pocket. Over there in the middle of the room, please. Start.
Eric Gallegos is a recent UC San Diego graduate and currently works at a prestigious law firm. He has 3 beautiful dogs, and he's getting married to his fiancée in June. Eric volunteers at his local Rotary Club, and he also builds houses for homeless people in Mexico every summer. Eric also smokes marijuana, which is what got him arrested when his legal cannabis collective was raided, and he was arrested and jailed overnight as a result. Marijuana is federally illegal and legal in some states, including our own California, which puts California in a gray zone of sorts, a place where state lawmakers still don't know how to set regulations for a drug that is simultaneously legal and illegal. And according to The Economist, on May 18, 2017, the Trump administration is more likely to force entrepreneurs to stick extra carefully to state regulations rather than push the boundaries of federal law. The question I'm answering before you today is, how will businesses handle the conflict between Californian legalization of marijuana and federal government threats? There are many threats that impede federal government. There are many threats that impede, so I totally lost my train of thought. There are many threats that impede legal cannabis cultivation and distribution. But for the purposes of today's essay, I'm only going to focus on 3. Specifically, the way that the federal government uses banking, taxes, and RICO laws to further impede the cannabis industry. So why should this be important to you? Well, you don't need to say like the times. I have the timer. But
I needed that.
Why should this be important to you? If you're not getting high already, you probably know someone else who is. Cannabis is growing in popularity, and the direction of recent state legalization is only going to encourage it to spread. The first conflict between California legalization of marijuana and federal government threats that cannabis businesses are forced to deal with is banking. If you ever walk into a cannabis business, you'll probably see a sign that says cash only. There's a reason why card is not accepted. According to the New York Times on September 9th, 2017, major banks and credit cards aren't allowed to receive cash that's been involved in illegal transactions. And since marijuana is still fairly illegal, banks don't service the industry out of fear that they'll be penalized for money laundering. This has created a cash industry ripe for illegal activity. The second conflict between California legalization of marijuana and federal government threats is taxes. Marijuana is illegal, but these legal businesses still have to pay their taxes to the government, and then some. According to the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, there's a anti-drug war tax rule, 280E, written by the Reagan administration, that basically states that businesses that deal in Schedule I substances, like marijuana, are prohibited from writing off common expenses, such as rent and utilities, that other businesses can. The third conflict between California legalization of marijuana and federal government threats that cannabis businesses are forced to deal with is RICO laws, specifically the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. Although this law is normally associated with anti-mob criminal prosecutions, it can also be used, as we can see in this example, in the 10th Circuit Court case, Safe Streets Alliance versus John Hickenlooper. Basically, according to the court case documents on June 7th, 2017, the defendants owned and operated a legal cannabis cultivation facility that neighbored the weekend ranch of Michael and Phyllis Riley. The Rileys used this law to pursue federal civil claims against the defendants, and basically alleged that their facility was producing a unpleasant and nasty marijuana smell that wafted onto their property. In June of 2017, the court declared that this was grounds to force the company to shut down, or the business to shut down. In summary, I've shown you 3 conflicts between California legalization of marijuana and federal government threats. 1, cannabis businesses can't use banks. 2, cannabis businesses have to pay higher taxes. And 3, federal RICO laws allow citizens to pursue civil claims against these cannabis businesses. Eric Gallegos, since his arrest, Eric Gallegos has become a lot more active in the cannabis industry. He has participated in the Los Angeles rally last March, and he also is a member of the National Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws. Eric is not alone. There are thousands like him in California that are demanding federal legislation that will not only legalize marijuana, but will also create a safer place for cannabis businesses to thrive. Now it's just up to the government to listen.
Thank you, Leonard. Let me give you some feedback, Leonard. Leonard, it was a good speech, well documented. I liked you put the question and all the definitions up there so it was clear. You didn't have to state them. You're doing this like you do right now, the whole speech.
Yeah, honestly, the entire speech, I was just thinking about the time, and that really screwed me up.
That's good. It's good to think about the time. I'm thinking about it too. And I thought your 3 points were right on track and very succinctly supported your thesis really well. So I thought that was good. Just watch your hands. You need to walk more efficiently to there, and then way a bit over almost by Calvin to the end of the desk, and then stay back in the center when you come. But you use you improve and you use the techniques well. So thank you. Good job. Okay, the next person should be up there. Who's on deck? Who's on deck? Come on. Who's on deck? Who's next? Come on. He's getting them all in today. Who's on deck? Who's on deck?
Another view.
You're on deck? Okay, come up here and sit.
Can I knock instead of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
No, what? Well, you want me to time? Jesus. No, I want you to just yell at. Oh, you think it disturbs people?
Yeah, it makes me kind of.
Makes them kind of gnarly, huh?
Yeah.
Just okay. Why don't you? Okay, you can knock, and then you can. Why don't you do this for me? Just yell out time when it's over.
Yeah, I can do that.
Oh God, I don't want to do this. We're wasting precious time. We're not going to get through everybody. Go. Start.
Okay. The regular low gas prices occurred in 1998 around $1.43 inflation adjusted. Perhaps the U.S. government is trying to bring these tempting prices back by construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline, or so-called Bakken Pipeline, which transports crude oil from the west of North Dakota to southern Illinois. This project was proposed in 2014 and is actually operational since the summer of 2017, according to Chicago Tribune. So will this pipeline help the United States economy? I say no, because of three following reasons. The first reason is that the jobs in constructing the pipeline is only temporary. Two is that the environmental damage could outweigh its costs, economic benefits. And three, it is more economically sound to invest this money into alternative energy. This discussion is important because despite all the controversies around this project, such as invasion of sacred Indian lands and environmental destruction, this project still happened, and it affects every one of us by taking our tax monies away. So the first reason is that the jobs created in this project was only temporary. According to Energy Transport Partners, ETA has stated that about 33,000 job years will be created through this construction of the pipeline, and $5 billion increase in sales and production. However, these numbers cannot be considered for future benefits, according to Frank Ackerman, PhD in economics from Harvard University, stated in 2017, said that because the project is already completed, these numbers cannot be considered into economic benefits. Furthermore, there's only the requirement for jobs to maintain the operations going is only 143 people across the 4 states. And according to Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are about 158 million jobs or employed people in the United States. That is about 9.3 times 10 to the negative 5th%, gain from this pipeline. So it is safe to say that there is no economic benefit through the creation of jobs. The second point is that the environmental damage could outweigh its economic benefits. According to EPA, it has stated that it costs about $36 per metric ton of carbon dioxide, and according to ETA, it would produce 36,000 barrels per day, 555,000 barrels per day, and with about 0.536 metric tons per barrel. That would cost the U.S. government about $4.6 billion annually, and that is straight coming down from our taxes. Furthermore, there will be more further economic environmental damage due to water contamination. There will be the groundwater supply would be exposed to toxins such as hydrogen fluoride, radioactive radium, and uranium that would drastically impact the quality of water, according to water research in 2017. This means a lot because the real estate economy would crash in these areas. There will be health costs and purification costs of the water, and it would make no sense to continue this pipeline due to these costs. And keep in mind, this is without any accidents. So with accidents, obviously the cost of everything would go up drastically, causing the U.S. government a lot more than $4.6 billion per year. So the last point is that it is more economically sound to invest this money into alternative energy. So in China and in United States, there has been 76% increase and around 130% increase in job sections by investing money in alternative energy. This is because the alternative energy requires higher labor forces, and therefore consistent labor forces are required to make these fuels operational, according to Robert Pollin in 2017. So therefore, because of these higher labor intensities, there will be more jobs created, more not temporary jobs, permanent jobs, and as more demand for alternative energy and clean fuel resources increases while the prices go down, there will be higher demand for jobs in these engineering sectors, and that would contribute directly to our country's GDP. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Steve, I appreciate you getting through it on time. Your delivery was pushed, and I understand that, but you got through it, and that was good. You gave us a little bit of a history lesson as your intro, and you took a strong position, which was good. Your argument on that they blew up the myth of creating long-term jobs, but I think that was a phony argument in favor of the economic benefits to it anyway. The advantages of the way that it transports oil, the way the Alaska pipeline has done so safely for many years. The environmental damage, okay, I'll give it to you because we're out of time, but come to my office hours sometime and I'll give you the problems with your arguments on, these are all maybe, could have, should have, maybe, could have, might, and you're right, there might be some environmental damage. There was just a spill on the Keystone, so. But I think that on balance, what the studies find is pipelines are the safest way compared to trucks and trains to transport this oil and natural gas. Your summary, conclusion, and tieback were all good. Do you have canais? No. Okay.
On the front.
On the front, your canais. Be smooth. Be persuasive. Have a voice paced with your speaking. How'd it go?
Well, the last one, pacing, was constricted.
Yeah.
I guess I could work on my fluidity better, and I guess persuasive. I thought I had a lot of statistics there, but I guess I could provide it more link to.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And the statistics, I think people were eyes were glazing over a little bit when they got a little too heavy on them. So watch that. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay. Who's on deck? Who's on deck? Who's on deck? Who's next? We're done with Extemp 2? Sit there. Start.
I need to leave you this note.
Oh, no. Oh, great. I love notes.
Can you read it later?
Oh, just now. Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Should I read it aloud to the class?
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. I love notes. Notes are good, yeah. Okay, go, Troy.
We want a leader, not a creepy tweeter. We shall overcome, and keep your tiny hands off my rights. These are all signs from the Women's March on January 21st, which, according to the Washington Post, among a number of other sources, was likely the largest single-day demonstration in U.S. history. My name is Troy Levitel, and today I'll be talking to you about why I believe sustained protests against now President Trump, protests like the Women's March, can give rise to a new progressive movement. And I'll give you 3 reasons as to why I think this is the case. But first, I want to note that according to a November 6th Washington Post ABC News poll, President Trump's approval rating remains historically low and confidence has declined. Americans are having strong reactions to this presidency. So the first point I want to talk about is that with the Women's March, the travel ban, repeal and replace, all of these different things that have really stirred the pot, people are speaking up like never before. In a March 2017 article from political organizer Robert Creamer, he notes that the election of President Trump has engaged millions of ordinary Americans many of whom have never been engaged in political activity of any kind. People are actually getting involved. Probably many of you are speaking up about politics when maybe you haven't before. I have, personally. The second point I want to talk about is that reactionary movements are already organizing. People aren't just shouting at walls, although some people are doing that. There are actually organizations forming and taking place following the election. So in Kate Aronoff's August 1st piece, Visible and Indivisible, The Birth of a Resistance Movement, she writes that organizations such as Indivisible have emerged as the face of citizen resistance to Trump. And there's been a surge of interest in these organizations post-election. Indivisible, for instance, didn't even exist before the election. And now there's an average of 2 chapters per voting district. That's a pretty big growth. The third point I want to make is that through these sustained protests, progressives have seen results. They've been successful, to some extent, in generating awareness and slowing President Trump's political agenda. On June 26th, Senator Dick Durbin tweeted, "I've gotten 5,000 letters and more than 2,000 calls opposing the Senate's Trump care just this week." There's really an influx of constituents speaking out. And so representatives on both sides have received these calls, and specifically with the proposed health care bill, and most of them have been negative. And as such, none of these bills have yet passed. That might change with this new tax plan, but we'll see. In Robert Creamer's aforementioned article, he says that if you give newly energized people a taste of success, they're much more prone to deepen their engagement. So when you see something working, you're more likely to keep going with it. In summary, I've given you 3 reasons why I believe sustained protests can give rise to a new progressive movement. First, millions of Americans are newly politically engaged as a result of this presidency. Second, reactionary movements have organized, and in large numbers. And third, protesters have had that taste of success, which will lead to deeper engagement. For these reasons, I believe sustained protests against President Trump and his policies can give rise to a new political movement, a new progressive movement. We want a leader, not a creepy tweeter. Americans are reacting largely and loudly to this presidency, and progressive movements hear their concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. What was the time?
3:40.
3:40, thank you. Can you step back a little bit, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Troy, I liked your speech. It was straight and to the point. I'll just tell you that as far as your speech was concerned, it was how movements start and sustain are a little bit more complicated and tricky than you provided. But on the surface, it looks like something may be stirring, something may be happening, and that's what you reported on. So that was good. Your sources were a little on the left, but that's okay. You know, they it's an echo chamber, and they like to think there's a movement going on, and there very well be. The march on Washington was very large. Your comment here was there's 2 chapters in every voting district wasn't documented. It wasn't footnoted. So is that your assertion?
No, that's
from the Kate Aronoff article?
Yeah.
From the progressive, yeah, okay. I would just say that you did a good job of arguing that the momentum and gave evidence for it, and the president's popularity, we can quibble about this, but it's gone up since his China visits, but not much, but there's still a great discontent for him. But there's still there's no question there's a sleeping giant that's been awakened, it appears to me anyway, and I think you captured that. I like we want a leader, not a creepy tweeter. I like the other one, we shall overcome, keep your tiny hands off my rights. So you did a good job. It could have been a little longer. You got up to 5 minutes, but we needed the time today, so thanks for getting it done. Thank you very much. Anytime, yeah. Who's on deck? There we go. Start. You get in the center where that little rope is the center. That's the center, yes. That's the center, yes. And she'll hold it for you.
Can you count down 4, 3, 2, 1?
Why not?
And then 10 seconds.
Okay, rock and roll.
Okay. A few weeks ago, I was at movie night with my friends, and one of my friends turned to me and asked, "Do you ever feel like you can actually relate to the characters on screen?" And I responded, "Not really, unless it's Jasmine, and even that is a pretty big stretch." My friend goes, "Well, at least you have Jasmine. I didn't really have anyone growing up." He is of Latino descent. For him, media representation is not something he was used to growing up. And with Latinx people being 56 million in the United States, I think it is a really important question for us to ask ourselves. How do we increase Latinx presence in film and TV shows? To answer this question, I think there are 3 steps that we need to take. 1, we need to fix how we cast people. 2, we also need to increase representation behind the scenes in terms of development and writing and production. And finally, we as consumers need to be more cognizant about our purchasing power and make sure we encourage people who are actually releasing diverse films. Step 1 of this plan has to do with casting. The LA Times reports in April 2017 that there are 4 major stereotypes Latinx people usually get cast into. 1, the spicy sex pot. An example of this is Sofia Vergara on Modern Family. 2, the maid. For example, Jennifer Lopez in The Maid in Manhattan. 3, the gangbanger, or 4, the Spanglish speaker. What this inherently does is it limits what Latinx people usually envision themselves in the industry. It also completely devalues a whole culture to 4 different stereotypes, which is something we should not accept as a society, and we should aspire to have more creative representation on screen. The next step has to do with behind the scenes. PBS reports in September 2015 that in the top 17 films in 2014, only 4.9% of them had leads of Hispanic descent. What is crazy to note is that this is the lowest of any person of color group that we take into consideration. And now if we go into the TV sector, it was noted by LA Times in February 2017 that only 3% of writers on major broadcasted TV shows happen to be from minority background. 3% of these TV shows have majority minority background writers. Shows such as Jane the Virgin or The Empire are really changing this trend, but that's not enough. 3% is abysmal, and we need to be able to get it to a range where we're actually accurately representing the population numbers that the Hispanics represent in the United States. The reason why behind the scenes is so important is because if producers and writers aren't there to vouch for these actors, there's no way they're going to be able to get their foot into the industry and be able to accurately portray themselves on screen. But we talked about who's on screen, we talked about who's behind screen, but we as consumers in front of the screen also need to be cognizant on the impact we can make in this industry. It was reported by the U.S. Census Bureau that right now the population of Hispanics is around 56 million, but by 2050 it's expected to hit around 105 to 106 million people. Production houses are starting to take notice of this, and a U.S. Today article reported in May 2017 that due to the rising Hispanic population, production companies such as Disney are starting to release films such as Coco, which is going to release actually tomorrow in theaters, which features an all-Latino voice cast, and it is the first film to ever do that. It's crazy to imagine that in 2017, we have finally gotten a film that's all Latino voice casted. But to improve upon that, we as consumers need to actively be aware of our purchasing power and make sure we pick films and watch films that encourage writers and those behind the scenes who are actually trying to make a positive step forward in this industry. Other research in this article also notes that Hispanics are 56 times more likely to go to the movie theater 6 times a year, which is the highest of any purchasing group in the United States. So to appeal to this group, they should be able to use their purchasing power and go to films that actually portray themselves and their culture. So in summary, we looked at the casting process, the behind-the-scenes production, and also how we as consumers have an effect on the industry with our purchasing power. Hopefully, in the future, when two friends finish movie night and they ask themselves, do they feel like they themselves or their culture was represented on screen, they'll be able to happily answer yes, that they did feel represented.
Thank you. Okay. Sumana. I like your speech a lot. You use notes, which I didn't like. You not in the power stance now or when you move, feet wider than your shoulders. Get in the habit of that. It's a more powerful stance and it keeps you from sliding. Your evidence was very compelling. You started with a sort of a colloquial, my friends and I went to the movies and we were talking, and you ended with that, and that was fine. On the, you couched the question, you gave the answer, and you quoted the LA Times and PBS NewsHour, and so that was good, and USA Today, so I guess you got most of your stuff from newspapers, and I guess, one of my debaters, Dean Flores, I don't know if you know him or heard of him, he was first Latina student body president here at UCLA, but he's been working a long time on making this community aware of their buying power, which is immense, which they're not using to their full advantage. So I think your statistics on 6 times the higher than others was a good statistic. And so you did a very good job, and you used the Chicago style, so that was good. All recent evidence. Longer eye contact, don't speak too fast, don't get flustered if interrupted. How'd it go?
I got interrupted during my first speech with someone opening the door.
That's very rude. Who was it?
They weren't in the
I
class.
see.
But in terms of getting flustered, I do know I got tripped up with one of the statistics because I just didn't know how to get it out properly with proper grammar. So that tripped me up.
Okay, good.
I think the rest of it went.
Okay, nice job. Thank you, Shimana. 3 minutes left in class. How many do we have left?
Me and her.
We have 4.
4?
5.
5? Okay, well, turn them in. Turn them in. Turn in your number 2. Turn in number 2.
So close.
You held that. I know you. This all should be labeled Extemp too. Are these labeled Extemp too?
Oh, did I label it? Can I see it? So I could just put number 2 next to that.
I'll do it.
Okay, sorry. I just put Extemp. There's my outline.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. If anyone doesn't have a place to go, you can come to my house. We have a couple extra plates. Extra credit. Yeah, that would require extra credit. Okay. Yeah.
So our third Extemp speeches are due next week or 10th week?
10th week.
10th week? Oh yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Policy brief topic.
Yeah, I'll be responding. I just was at this tournament all weekend, so I was swamped.
Okay, sounds good.
I already started my public policy. Is that fine?
What was? Let me hear your word, and I'll try to do it just on the fly.
It's about the Cuban embargo. That
what was your wording?
We should immediately end trade sanctions against Cuba.
We should immediately end trade sanctions against Cuba?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Obama took a long step toward doing it. You want to go further than Obama, and President Trump is trying to bring them back, and so you're in the middle of all this.
That's
So
what I
where
included.
are you gonna? Don't try to include. You have to include. So you have to figure out where you are in the middle of all that.
Because it's, I started talking about like President Obama, and then after that,